My name is Shati Mayanandi, and I'm an international tax policy advisor. I have the pleasure of contributing a chapter on international tax matters, and my particular focus was on policy coherence for sustainable development. The aim of my chapter was to humbly provide some food for thought for policymakers in donor countries on what could be done in the area of international tax to help developing countries generate more taxes. Since a lot of technical support and capacity building activities are conducted by international organizations in developing countries, such as the OECD, World Bank, UN, and also regional tax administrations such as CIAT, another contributor to this book. I will not focus on the area of technical assistance. What I focused on in my chapter was the domestic tax policy and administrative choices at the level of the donor country, which can have interactions with the tax base of developing countries. I focus on international tax matters, what is called international tax matters, and specifically on tax treaty policy choices, exchange of information instruments, and other international tax cooperation modalities, such as bilateral safe harbors, joint audits, and bilateral APAs. And the reason why I looked at these specific areas is that depending on their design, they can have positive as well as negative spillovers on the tax base of developing countries. And why is this subject matter important for the SDGs? First of all, taxes are regarded as one of the main financing sources for the SDGs, and this is why so a lot of development aid money is devoted to helping developing countries raise more tax revenues. And hence, it would be a great convenience if the domestic tax policies of the donors are sensitive, if not accommodating towards this goal in fostering more revenue generation in developing countries. Additionally, many developing countries rely heavily on corporate tax revenues from big multinationals and have a higher exposure to wealth held offshore by their residents, hence also a bigger exposure to maybe undeclared funds. And this is why these international tax matters are of particular importance to developing countries in their endeavor to generate more taxes. These taxes are needed in order to attain the sustainable development goals. I think the first key takeaway is that policy coherence is not a zero-sum game. And that what I mean by that is that adjusting tax policies and administrative practices more towards development objectives can also be beneficial for the industry of the donor country, of course, depending on their design choices, Another takeaway is that policy coherence does not prescribe full coherence, which is also impossible to attain, and that is also not dogmatic and dictate that development objectives always trump every other national policy. One should rather see policy coherence as some sort of a mechanism to facilitate dialogue among different ministries and stakeholders with different backgrounds, and through this facilitate this informed weighing and balancing of different tax policy options, and then make an informed decision. And then I think another takeaway would be that I think that one of the current major obstacles why this open, inclusive dialogue is currently not taking place or not sufficiently taking place is that I think that different ministries and different stakeholders speak different languages. What I mean by that is that you have technical ministries and stakeholders and more generalistic ones, and then also more intuitive and emotional ones. And this is all good, but it's sometimes difficult to then start a conversation, particularly when it's such a technical subject matter as international tax is. And on top of this difficulty, there is also another difficulty that different stakeholders have a different understanding on which tax policies actually benefit sustainable development. And due to these different understandings and the complex subject matter by itself. Policymakers often shun this topic or do not touch it properly, although they internationally endorse it and also intuitively know that it's really important, because we all know that giving with one hand and taking with the other is highly inefficient. It might also not constitute prudent public spending. I think, first of all, it's fair to say that we all agree that tax and sustainable development are very strongly interlinked. And me, as a tax person, am also particularly happy to see that there's this current spotlight on the importance of tax when it comes to development projects in developing countries. And I strongly think, and not just because I'm biased, because I love tax, but just objectively, if I can be objective in this subject matter, that aid money, which is spent helping developing countries generate more tax revenues, is actually well spent, because it's the ultimate way of ensuring this catalytic effect of aid money, which every development practitioner aspires, because this money is invested into self-sufficiency. But having said that, I also still think that there is a big room for improvement on the side of donor countries to actually evaluate their own tax policies with regard to the impact of developing countries to generate more tax revenues. And in my short chapter, I don't conclude with like a silver bullet on how to actually create this coherence. I rather try to provide some inspiration, what could be done in certain tax policy areas. And I also know, me as a tax lawyer, I have my own biases and blind spots and idiosyncratic thinking patterns. And so this doesn't need to constitute the truth how it should be done, but I just hope for the future that more work and research will be conducted, and that one breaks the silos and brings together all relevant ministries and stakeholders, business, civil society, and academia, and that we then all work together on how to refine domestic strategy on like how to increase policy coherence for sustainable development in the area of international tax matters. I think it's really important. And I also am aware that this dialogue might not be that easy, and bridging different understandings of what is good for sustainable development can be difficult. But I'm also a big fan of the Socratic method, and I think that cooperative, argumentative dialogue among people with different skill sets and different backgrounds can actually bring us closer to what constitutes the truth, whatever it is, what is beneficial for sustainable development in the area of international tax policy. And I think we can just all win from this dialogue, and this might result in more creative and informed policy design choices in the future.